Hello, and welcome to Hola Cultura's ArteVoces Artist Dialogue Session. I'm Melinda Machado, your host, and I'm speaking with three talented local Latine artists, all of whom coincidentally create works in ceramics. Mia Angel is a Mexican artist based in Washington, D.C. Noelle Zambrano is a ceramic artist working from her home studio in Hyattsville, which is in D.C.'s Maryland suburbs. Rachel Dickerson is a multidisciplinary artist who grew up in Upper Marlboro, also in D.C.'s Maryland suburbs. As a way of introductions, I wanted the three of our panelists to talk to us about identity and duality.
Well, first of all, thank you, Melinda, for the invitation to Hola Cultura, for inviting us all to be here. I think it's a great platform to meet other artists. And yes, I'd like to talk about identity, but also say that at first, I think identity was what drove me to make these pieces that I am currently working on. And it really informed my aesthetic, my drive to learn more about the history of Mexico. But it's funny because I always think that had I started my clay journey in Mexico, I wouldn't have been looking inward, looking to Mexico to become inspired.
Thank you again for this opportunity. It's been such an honor to be able to speak on this platform with all these amazing women. So I am African American and Salvadorian, and I'm adopted. So I'm 28. I turned 29 this year. And growing up, I felt like I didn't have an identity. I didn't know who I was. And then being able to finally ask my adoptive mom, who am I? What's going on? Like, I just need to know. And unfortunately, she couldn't tell me. But I took an ancestry DNA, and my highest results were Salvadorian. So at 22, finding out you're Salvadorian, it's like, wow, okay. Also at 22 is when I started getting more integrated in my practice with ceramics and sculpture. So I'm busy just trying to figure out in my head, how do I bridge, me identifying as African American all my life and resulting in you are also Salvadorian. So from that, I felt like with my practice, it took me researching, just sitting down with my Salvadorian side of the family, just asking who are my ancestors? Because if you see all of my works, this person is creating something of the earth, and understanding ancestrally, this is what my ancestors were doing. And it's amazing seeing how I don't even think when I just work. I just create. I don't think too hard. I just let my hands do the work. And at the end of that, I'm like, wow, I made that. I think that for me is how I connect my past and my present. Just understanding that this has been my life and my history, and just tying those in together to embrace who I am and the artist that I am, to put out the work that I'm doing.
Thank you again for hosting us and for giving us a platform to talk about our work. I grew up with a really strong sense of identity, a really strong sense of an immigrant identity. My Ecuadorian side, that's my mom's side. My parents divorced, so I primarily grew up with my mom, and that's how I most strongly identify. But both countries have a really rich craft tradition. Folk art is so central to the material culture and what I grew up seeing in my home. There was just a ton of pre-Columbian ceramics, these figures and heads and stirrup jars and tapestries and weaving. And my family also, everyone had some kind of skilled trade or craft. It's funny because I actually didn't really see myself in that until I had my daughter in my early 30s and I took a ceramics class. I had always thought that arts and all that wasn't what we do. We don't come to this country to be artists. So I didn't really see it for myself. But when I did it, kind of to Rachel's point a little bit, there was, I think, some maybe cultural memory or something in the process, in working with your hands in very intuitive ways that just emerged for me. I think those are some of the ways that identity comes into play in my work.
Thank you so much. Noelle, one of your strengths is wheel-thrown ceramics, but in January Instagram, you said, I found myself drawn to building slowly by hand, coil by coil, blending, braiding, and getting really tactile, and that you dedicated that hand series to the ancestors who persevered against all odds for me to be here today and in defiance of those who seek to intimidate and terrorize us. And for Rachel, we also looked at some of your posts and learned that, you talked about the Washington, D.C. area as this melting pot of cultures, and that through our collaborations, our discussions, our exhibitions, we can explore the diverse influences that shape our artistic practices. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit of Washington, D.C.
So I am from Maryland, and when you're a native of Maryland, you're exposed to D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, the DMV. So growing up, of course, I know all of us have probably taken those trips to the museums. I think for me, the one that hit the most was the American Indian Museum. But I believe just literally being immersed into those museums and just seeing what Native people were doing in this country was very inspiring. And I think that helped me to realize, if you look at my work, you can see it's more of a naturalistic form. You can see that I take my inspiration from nature, hence where Native Americans have done that as well too. So I think when you look at just those examples there have definitely inspired me. So I think just being able to be immersed in the DC area, it's a blessing.
So yes, speaking of ancestral traditions, Mia, you mentioned on Instagram that you source your clay from both the U.S. as well as Mexico. So in your artistic practice, do you find a difference in the way the clays behave or an inspiration? Can you talk a little bit?
I was lucky to start the journey here in DC and in the United States in particular, because that led me back to my country, back to my father's homeland, Oaxaca, my mother's homeland, Veracruz. There's such a rich history in both. And so I learned to appreciate that. I lived in Mexico, Monterrey, Mexico City for so many years and didn't take the time to center the indigenous culture and the history that I have personally and all around me. And so I am so glad that I have that opportunity to do that now. Here, I'm lucky to, go to really well-equipped studios and everything that you can think of. You have wheels, you have tools, you have clay that is sent to you in a bag, and all you have to do is throw it on the wheel. And so that's a great resource to have. But it also drove me to learn more in Mexico and see how they were doing it from years and years, centuries of practice. And so when I study in Oaxaca, I don't use any wheels. I use corn husks and ancestral tools that they've used for centuries. And my biggest interest now, after having experienced both, is mixing those two techniques and how to do it here with the stoneware clay for structure and stability and durability, but also how to bring in those colors from Mexico, the land in Mexico that's really rich and red, or going on a session to dig up some clay in DC as well, or with friends, or in Virginia. So I really think that the drive to learn, plus also having access to all of these studios and equipments and things that we have here in the U.S., gave me the opportunity to experiment more than I thought I would.
Thank you. Noelle, you did allude to that in that sometimes we ourselves may not be the immigrants, but we absorb these immigration experiences from our parents, our grandparents, or other family members. So is there a place, whether you've experienced it yourself or from afar?
Well, I can say I have not experienced that. Just being adopted, and I found out that my father, who was Salvadorian, passed away back in 2022. So I am still longing for that connection with wanting to absorb being in touch with my roots and in touch with my culture. I will say I've been super blessed to, within the last 3 years, I work in transit, and most of my close friends in transit have been Salvadorian. And we have been, they teach me a lot, and I couldn't ask or be any more grateful for them to this day. Shout out to you guys. All the things that I never learned growing up, all the things that I still don't know to this day, they're educating me in rich culture and rich history of El Salvador. And just being able to recognize that DC and Maryland, Virginia, we have a really big influx of Salvadorian people here.
To your point, there are not many Ecuadorians in DC. If I meet Ecuadorians, it's very rare. I feel a sense of place to DC, not just because I strongly identify as a DC native. I really do. Deep down, I'm in Hyattsville, but I am a DC girl. My family, when they moved here, we lived in DuPont Circle, and family in Mount Pleasant, and I grew up in Cleveland Park, and then slowly moved eastward as gentrification kind of pushed us out. And so now I'm as far east as Hyattsville, but the clay knows no borders. And the clay, I discovered in doing some work at my house that I have a ton of red stoneware in my backyard. And so I didn't know what to do with it. I just put it in a bunch of boxes and I put it in the garage, and I said, okay, I'm going to figure out what to do with this. And then last summer, I did a residency at a craft school in Maine called Haystack on working with local materials. And this, my teacher was an expert in all of this, and he just goes around and forages for his clay and his feldspars and mixes all his own materials. So that's been my obsession these days, is I'm just everywhere looking. So at this point, I use half and half, because I don't want to deplete my entire backyard and just have a pit. So I try to use it sparingly, but I do use a lot of that clay, and I feel it's important to think about the materiality of such a tactile craft.
Well, I think I will always go back to Oaxaca, and that's just because what I know now. And so that is where I mentioned, my father's family is from, where they're based, and learning from the teachers, the maestras there, has been such an eye-opening experience. Like I said, when we're here, we get the access to the studios and the wheels and the electric ovens and kilns and all of the things that we need. But what I've learned most is to do without, in a sense, from my teachers in Oaxaca, who teach me to use my whole body, the things that are outside, your fingers, the hair, from animals, and the sticks that you need for firing a pit. Not all wood can be fired and to that temperature. And so just learning, like you said, to use what is available in that area is so important.
What would you describe the DC area, DMV art community that you work in one or two words?
I think my 2 words would be immersive and truly family-oriented. Once you find your community of artists, you'll thrive.
I would describe the DC arts community as essential. I think we are essential workers, and the work that artists do is so vital and important in hard times and in good times. Especially now, our work feels very, very important. And at the same time, I feel that it is somewhat undervalued.
I would describe it as a multicultural soup. my favorite food, but also to Noelle's point of it being undervalued, also underfunded, underappreciated, just because I've been able to observe it from both standpoints. there is a distinct lack of social and economic diversity within the art spaces. And that has to do with defunding all of these social programs, defunding the arts in schools, and slowly chipping away on that. So I think we as artists, these interactions that we have and these conversations should definitely be used to figure out ways around that, by creating, I think they call it here like third spaces, places where people can exist without having to spend money and learn about the arts and about what brings joy to each and every one of us.
So I always find it fascinating to ask people, when did you know deep in your soul that you were an artist? And when you felt free to be that artist, or if you still have some of those conflicts?
I studied communications. I worked in PR and marketing. That was my professional occupation, right? And so when I started ceramics, I did see it as a hobby, and I was socialized to believe it's a hobby. You know, it's something you do either on the side or for fun. And so I think the more I wanted to build my life around ceramics, the more trouble I had believing that I was an artist, or I had imposter syndrome, and I thought, I'm not classically trained in any art school, and so I couldn't possibly call myself an artist. And I think that's where we go wrong. Anyone making art and presenting that art to even their friends, I think, would be considered an artist, because becoming an artist is something that you have to embody and that you have to get a perspective on and have your own voice and create that. And so this whole journey has helped me to understand that I am an artist. I can be multiple things at once and not just define myself as one thing.
I don't have an art degree. I have a BA in anthropology. I have a master's in linguistics. I had a career in advocacy, working with the immigrant community in DC, my beloved community. But no, I never thought of myself as an artist until I took that one clay class. And sure, I was a little bit clumsy on the wheel at first, but very quickly I got the hang of it, and it just clicked for me. And my teacher would sometimes get frustrated with me because I would come in and say I want to make this something that you're not supposed to make as a beginner. And she would say, I don't know, Noelle. And I'd say, no, it's fine. And it was fine. I did it. I almost like that I didn't go to art school, because I feel free to do what I envision. I don't have anyone's voices in my head telling me what's right, what's wrong, or what school of this or the, nothing. It's just what is intuitive to me, what feels good. And yeah.
In high school, I took computer graphics, and just growing up, I love magazines. I love picture books. And I think I had that inkling I think I want to be an artist, especially when it came to visual communication. I mean, visual communication is around us every single day. We thrive off of it. It wasn't until college, though, when I took my first ceramics class, and I just loved being one with clay. It's something that you just feel, and sometimes you can't explain it to people. I would say within the last 5 years for sure is when I knew I was an artist, because I was just taking my practice. And when people tried to tell me it was a hobby a few years ago, I denied that. I said, it's never going to be a hobby for me. This is something that I want to live by, even if I don't make money off of it, even if I don't get famous. I know that this is something that I want to continue doing. Just staying true to myself and staying true to my heart, and knowing I am an artist, I am a fine artist, I'm a studio artist, and I'm a clay artist.
Well, thank you, everyone. This concludes Hola Cultura's ArteVoces Artist Dialogue session. It has been my great pleasure to connect these creative women working in clay. I'm Melinda Machado, the Director of the Office of Communications and Marketing at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, and I have spent this time with our Washington area artists, Mia Angel, Noelle Zambrano, and Rachel Dickerson. We spoke at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library in beautiful downtown Washington, D.C. on March 7th, 2025. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and support our local artists.